My name is Clara Monroe, and the day I refused to work for my family's empire, they treated me like a traitor. My father said I'd embarrass the Monroe legacy. I said I'd build one of my own. By the time they see what I've created, I won't need their approval, but they might need mine. Before I dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far stories like mine can travel. Now, let me take you back to the day I stopped being a Monroe and started becoming myself. If you've ever stood in front of your father and felt like you were talking to a brick wall, except colder and more expensive, then you'll understand what this moment was like. The mahogany door clicked shut behind me. His office at the Monroe estate always felt like walking into a power exhibit. Glass awards lined the wall, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with economic journals, a globe with real gold inlay spinning slowly behind his desk. My father, Charles Monroe, sat like a king before it, suited and stiff-backed, eyes flicking to his Rolex every few seconds. I was 25 and soaked through with nerves, but I didn't stutter. "I'm not joining Monroe and Tate." He blinked once, then again. A soft scoff followed, dangerous, familiar. "You've had your little rebellion, Clara. Art school, sawdust, street shows. Now it's time to grow up." My hand tightened around the leather-bound portfolio I'd brought as a peace offering. It was my latest mirror design, a chisel-carved, oak-trimmed piece that had won 2 design awards last month. He hadn't even opened the email. "I'm not here for another job pitch, Dad. I've already started my brand." "You what?" His chair scraped loudly across the tile. My mother, Isabel, sat on the settee by the window, stiffly pretending to sip tea. She flinched at his tone but didn't interrupt. "I'm building my own line, Monroe Design Studios. Small batch custom vanity pieces, handcrafted, ethical sourcing, all of it." He laughed, short and brutal. "You expect to live off hobbyist furniture. I expect to build something I'm proud of." He pointed a finger at me, sharp, jabbing. "You want to sand wood and pander to social media idiots, fine. But don't use our name." "I am a Monroe," I said, voice trembling. "I can't change that." "You're not acting like one. Monroe's lead institutions. We build empires, not Etsy shops." I looked at my mother, silently begging for backup, her lips parted. She inhaled softly. "Let it go, Charles," she murmured. He whirled on her. "Don't coddle her, Isabel." She said nothing more. That was her way. Quiet dissent, always too late. The silence burned. He paced for a moment. Then he spoke, low and venomous. "You want to leave this family, go ahead, but don't expect a penny. Not from the trust, not from me. You'll have what you came with, 2 suitcases and a chip on your shoulder." I nodded once. "Then I guess that's all I need." I turned to go. "Ungrateful brat," he hissed. I didn't look back. The housekeeper met me at the front door, already holding the umbrella I'd left in the foyer. My suitcases sat beside her like obedient dogs. It was raining. Of course it was. By the time I reached the train station, my coat was soaked and the handles on my rolling bag had splintered from the weight. The only seat left was next to a man eating a steaming pork bun, the scent overwhelming. I sat in silence, legs trembling as the train pulled away from the estate. Drops blurred the window, but I could still see the wrought iron gates as they vanished. My throat was tight. My pride was thinner than my coat. But I clenched my jaw and whispered to myself, so low I wasn't sure I'd even said it aloud. "They'll regret this." And I meant every word. Jess's flat was exactly what you'd expect from a struggling designer's Craigslist miracle. Cracked tiles, paint-stained floors, and the faint smell of burnt toast no matter what time it was. But it had a garage-sized room in the back, and that became mine. A mattress on pallets, a folding desk, a second-hand mini lathe. It wasn't much, but for the first time it was mine. Jess Lee, my flatmate, introduced herself with a drill in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She was a queer, half-Korean product designer with a mouth like a nail gun and a heart like sandpaper, rough but steady. The day I moved in, she looked me up and down like a cut of lumber and said, "So, Monroe and Tate's golden girl finally bilayed on the big money. You're either brave or stupid." I shrugged. "Ask me in 6 months." She smirked. "Hope you like sawdust, babe. It's basically our 3rd roommate." We weren't friends yet, but there was an understanding between us. We both knew what it felt like to be underestimated by men in suits with inherited business cards. Most nights, I barely slept. I'd sketch until dawn, then resketch after dawn because nothing looked right at 3 a.m. My hands blistered from sanding prototypes. I burned through salvaged wood like firewood. Once, I short-circuited the whole flat by plugging in an experimental LED mirror without checking the wiring first. Jess stumbled into the workshop in a t-shirt that said chaos in a crop top, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Did you just try to electroshock therapy yourself, or is this your version of creative flow? I looked down at the smoking power strip. Maybe both. She rolled her eyes, but helped me reset the fuse box anyway. Failure was constant. I split more mirror frames than I finished. But it didn't matter. Every time something broke, I salvaged it, recarved it, repurposed the scraps. Just like I was doing with my life. Jess never said much, but she started leaving cups of tea near my workstation. Sometimes she'd pause at the door and just say, "Sleep is free, you know," before disappearing back into her room. One night, after yet another prototype cracked right down the middle during testing, I sat slumped on the floor, head in my hands. Wood just clung to my cheeks like ash. Jess wandered in, barefoot and unimpressed. "You gonna cry every time a hinge misaligns?" I looked up, eyes stinging. "No, just every third time." She snorted, sat beside me, and picked up one of my broken mirror frames. "This design, it's clean, confident. Kind of brutal, but in a way people like when they're secretly insecure." "Thanks," I said, not sure if it was praise or therapy. "Point is," she continued, "if you keep making these and you get them in the right hands, you'll sell. It's just a matter of when." I stared at her, genuinely surprised. "Jess, do you believe in what I'm doing?" She shrugged. "I believe you're too stubborn to quit. That's good enough." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in weeks. By the end of the second month, we turned the living room into a half-studio, half-chaotic packing station. Orders were still trickling in, mostly from word of mouth or from friends of Jess's who'd reposted my sketchbook photos on their socials. I built a basic website. The name, Monroe Design Studios, blinked at me on the homepage. It felt like a defiant whisper. One night just passed by as I was rearranging product shots. "Your name's gonna be on every shelf in London, huh?" "That's the plan." She narrowed her eyes at the screen, then smirked. "You ever sleep?" "Sleep is free," I threw back, grinning. Hope was there. Small, flickering like a pilot light refusing to go out. I didn't know when I'd break through, but something inside me knew I would. I had no backing, no press, no funding. Just 2 hands, 1 dream, and a name I no longer needed to borrow. The pop-up was Jess's idea. "We need eyes on your stuff. You can't build a kingdom from a backroom," she said, handing me a flyer for a weekend micro-retail space on Brick Lane. "Also, I'm tired of tripping over your mirrors when I go to the bathroom." We scraped together the application fee and rented a space the size of a large closet. 2 folding tables, 1 hanging sign, and 5 vanity mirrors. That was my inventory. Everything else, the paint, the polish, the custom brass inlays, I made up for with handwritten placards and a bouquet of fake eucalyptus stems from the charity shop. The first morning was dead quiet. We sold nothing before noon. At one point, a woman asked if I did custom TikTok ring lights and walked off when I said no. But around 2, a woman in oversized sunglasses and neon boots stopped in front of my booth. She didn't say a word, just examined a walnut-framed mirror with a sculpted ivy motif, ran her fingers along the carved edge, then snapped a picture. "Is this your work?" she finally asked. "Yes. You made this by hand?" "I did." She pulled down her glasses. "It's stunning." Before I could thank her, she asked for my card, tagged me in an Instagram story, and vanished. Jess was halfway through eating a late lunch bao bun when her phone buzzed. "Oh my God," she muttered, then louder. "CLARA. You're in Sage Rivera's story. Like the Sage Rivera." I blinked. "Should I know who that is?" "She has 2.4 million followers and a skincare line that sold out in 6 minutes. By sunset, the booth was swarming. People came for photos. Then they started buying. By the end of the day, all 5 mirrors were gone. We went home with nothing but receipt stubs and sore feet. The next morning, I woke up to 862 unread DMs and 37 pending orders. My phone buzzed nonstop. Jess danced around the kitchen with a spatula in one hand and her laptop in the other. "You're trending, babe, like trending. You better start hiring." I laughed, breathless, part disbelief, part panic. "Holy hell," I muttered. "We did it." "No," Jess corrected. "You did it." That weekend, I barely ate or slept. I built mirrors till my fingertips went raw. I shipped boxes with shaky hands. My website crashed 3 times in 2 days. A boutique in Notting Hill called, then a second one in Camden. By Monday, Clara Monroe was a buzzword, but something felt off. That night I stood in the living room alone, the TV flickering softly in the background, the house finally still after 4 days of chaos. My inbox overflowed with messages. My account hit 20K followers in under 72 hours. My name was everywhere. And yet, I stared at the wall and felt absolutely nothing. Why don't I feel anything? Jess came in quietly, sipping tea, eyes on me. She didn't say it, but I could tell she saw it too, the numbness. The kind that settles in when success comes faster than your heart can catch up. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, lied. "Yeah, just tired." But the truth was something I couldn't quite name. I had everything I'd begged the world to see. So why did I suddenly feel invisible? It started with one photo, me chiseling an ashwood frame under a cracked warehouse skylight. No makeup. No script. Just sawdust on my brow and a whisper of light through the smoke. And somehow it was enough to make the world look twice. The LUK email landed at 4:37 a.m. I was on the studio floor, halfway asleep in a nest of bubble wrap and fabric swatches, when Jess sprinted in, waving her phone like she'd found the Ark of the Covenant. "Clara, you're in, not just a mention. A feature. Style section. 3rd spread. Look." I blinked at the glowing screen. There I was, centered in a high-res shot, grimy, focused, borderline feral. The caption read, "Clara Monroe, the heir of handcrafted rebellion." I sat up too fast and hit my elbow on the table. Jess didn't even blink. She dropped the phone in my lap and said, "Told you, called it. I want a cut of the prophecy royalties." The article was wild, poetic. Somehow, they'd turned my life of overdrawn accounts and splintered knuckles into a story of artistic rebellion and feminine grit. They'd even quoted something I barely remembered saying during the interview. "I don't want to compete with factories. I want to make what machines can't." By breakfast, my inbox was a battlefield. Subject lines screamed. "Collab opportunity, Vogue Interiors. Press request, Good Morning Britain segment. Interested. Capsule collection proposal, High Street partnership." I couldn't breathe. I wasn't sure if I was thrilled or terrified or both at once. Jess shoved a cup of instant coffee into my hands. "Breathe, blink, swallow, then read the one from Fiona Lee." I clicked it open. It was short, elegant, lethal in the way only real offers are. "Clara, we are thoroughly impressed by your recent feature in Elle. Your design language speaks to a new era of tactile luxury. Would you be open to a meeting to discuss a capsule collection for our AW line? Our team would be honored to collaborate. Warm regards, Fiona Lee, Director of Home and Design, Ashbridge & Co." I reread it 3 times. By the 4th, Jess had already thrown a hoodie at me and opened her laptop. "You're not saying no. We're taking the call. I'll stand behind you holding cue cards if I have to." Ashbridge & Co. wasn't just a brand, it was the department store. The kind of place my mother used to drag me through during holiday sales, whispering which pieces were Monroe-worthy. The irony made me dizzy. That afternoon, I sat on a Zoom call wearing a linen shirt that still smelled faintly of varnish. Fiona Lee appeared like a mirage, flawless bob, pearl earrings, not a single flicker of judgment at my cluttered backdrop. "Clara," she said, voice like velvet, "we've been watching your work evolve for months. Your aesthetic feels both elemental and dangerous. That's a rare line to walk." We spoke for 20 minutes. About design. About ethics. About production limits and how I insisted on finishing each frame by hand. She listened. She nodded. She didn't flinch when I told her I couldn't fulfill more than 30 pieces a month without losing the soul of it all. "I don't want to scale so fast I forget why I started," I admitted. She smiled. "Then we build around you." By the time I hung up, I felt like someone had handed me the blueprint to the future. My hands trembled as I turned to Jess. "She wants a capsule line. Boutique edition. No mass production, all under Monroe Studios." Jess blinked. "You have a studio name?" I grinned. I do now. That night, we celebrated with cheap rosé and better hummus than we could afford. I danced around the flat like an idiot, humming old protest songs. I sent the Elle article to my old mentor, then immediately regretted it. I almost emailed my mother. Almost. Instead, I opened my sketch pad, drew 6 rough outlines of a limited mirror line, walnut and smoked brass. Something lunar, something sharp. Jess came up behind me and dropped a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I looked down at my designs, then at the email offers stacked like dominoes. They finally see me, I said softly. Good, she replied. Now make them remember. I thought carving wood was the hardest thing I'd ever do until I had to carve out space for myself inside my own success. The capsule line launched with 3 signature pieces. Each was handcrafted, boxed with reclaimed velvet, and engraved with my initials in the lower right corner. CM, the first batch, sold out in 92 minutes. Within a week, they were on waiting lists in Tokyo, Dubai, and Toronto. My inbox became a pipeline of flattery disguised as opportunity. PR firms wanted to elevate the brand voice. Packaging teams offered luxury narrative cohesion. Influencers wanted mirrors in exchange for exposure. It was everything I'd fought for. And I was exhausted. One gray Thursday, Jess and I met for tea on a rooftop cafe overlooking the river. She'd insisted we leave the flat. You need actual oxygen, Clara. That studio of yours is starting to smell like boiled glue and anxiety. The lavender tea steamed between us, delicate and fragrant. The city buzzed below. I hadn't looked up from my phone in an hour. Hey, Jess said gently. You're shaking. I looked down. My hands trembled just slightly, enough to make the cup rattle in its saucer. Haven't been sleeping, I admitted. I keep waking up thinking I've missed a delivery or a call. You've been missing everything else, babe, she said softly. Food, sunlight, actual human words. I laughed dryly. Can't out-hustle trauma, huh? Jess raised an eyebrow. Did you just say that? No, I sighed. You did last week. She nodded. Good, at least it's in your bloodstream now. I didn't want to cry, but the weight of everything, expectation, success, the creeping sense that I was sprinting on a conveyor belt I couldn't slow down, pressed against my chest like a clamp. There are 35 pending orders in the queue, I murmured. And I just got asked to do a line of dressing tables, and I haven't carved in 2 weeks. Not really. I've been managing, emailing, delegating, approving sample stains. But the chisel, I looked at my hands. Every time I pick it up, I freeze. Jess said nothing at first, just watched me the way you watch a tree creak in a storm, wondering which branch will snap first. You're burning out, Clara. I can't afford to. Then you'll break. I stared out at the city, its windows glowing like stars under clouds. When I left Monroe and Tate, I said, I thought proving I could build something of my own would fix the ache, that if I could get just one article, one feature, one buyer, I'd stop needing their approval. And, she asked, I got all of it, and now I don't sleep, I don't eat, and I don't even feel joy when I ship a piece anymore. I just feel fear, like someone's going to find out I'm a fraud. Jess leaned in. Listen to me, you're not a fraud, you're just tired. You're building an empire with no army. That's not brave, that's brutal. I cracked a smile. So poetic. I'm serious, you need boundaries, a break, sleep. You can't chisel clarity out of wood when your mind's fraying like old rope. I sipped the tea. Let the steam soften the knot in my throat. She was right. But all I could think about was what would happen if I slowed down. Would people forget? Would Fiona Lee regret the partnership? Would my father catch wind of my success and claim credit? The thought made my jaw clench. You okay? Jess asked. I forced a smile. I will be. The envelope was cream-colored. Heavy stock. No return address. Just my name written in all-caps black ink, as if whoever sent it wanted it to bruise. It came with the Morning Post, wedged between a sample wood stain kit and a late invoice. Jess dropped it on the table while unpacking groceries. You got something ominous and expensive-looking. I tore it open half-distracted, still on a client call about lighting placement for an upcoming shoot. But the words snapped me out of autopilot so fast I nearly dropped my phone. This is a formal notification of alleged copyright infringement, trade violation, and breach of contract. Jess turned at the sound of my sharp inhale. What? I handed her the letter, barely able to speak. As she read, her face shifted curiosity to confusion, confusion to anger. "You've got to be kidding me. Clara, who sent this?" I flipped through the attached pages. Legal jargon, claimed dates, itemized lists of my own mirror names, diagrams. Someone, some entity, was accusing me of stealing my own designs, and not just one piece. The entire capsule line. My body went ice cold. "This can't be real," I whispered. "I own everything. I documented it. All my sketches are dated. Each piece has a provenance tag. I built these, every joint, every finish, every fault." Jess slammed the letter down. "It says they're considering a court injunction to halt further sales. They want to freeze your online store." Panic hit like a wave. My knees buckled and I sat hard on the studio stool. A lawsuit. Now, I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and Googled the firm's name. They were real, prestigious. Known for representing luxury brands in copyright wars, and clearly expensive. My head spun. "I can't afford a solicitor," I mumbled. "I'm already skipping meals to keep up with production and shipping. If I lose this, if they halt my site, it's over. My name, my momentum, my income, gone." Jess crouched beside me. "Deep breath, babe. In, out." I tried, but my chest wouldn't expand. Was this how it ended? Not with failure, but with theft. That night I pulled out every journal, sketchpad, and receipt I had. Spread them across the kitchen table like tarot cards. My hands shook as I arranged wood samples next to their designs, as if trying to convince the furniture to defend itself. Midnight came and went. Jess stayed nearby, silent but present. Occasionally she'd slide a cup of tea toward me or dig through boxes looking for more proof, any proof. Around 2 a.m., she found me in the bathroom, sitting on the tile floor with my head against the sink. "You've worked too hard for this to disappear in a courtroom," she said gently. "We're going to figure this out." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Not yet. My mind kept spiraling. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if someone had really stolen my work and claimed it first? What if this was deliberate? And worst of all, what if it came from someone I knew? I hadn't touched my chisel in a week, but suddenly all I wanted was the comfort of carving. The sound of wood yielding. The one thing that made sense when nothing else did. But when I picked it up, my hand wouldn't stop shaking. I dropped it. It clattered to the floor. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not quiet tears, but full-body sobs. The kind that don't just come from fear, but from rage. From the terror of watching something you built with your soul be threatened by someone who never lifted a tool in their life. Jess watched for a while, then gently stepped out. I sat alone until sunrise, surrounded by paper and dust, wondering how it was all unraveling so fast. I had built this brand with blood and grit. I had survived exile, shame, hunger, burnout. But I wasn't sure I could survive this. I was supposed to smile for the cameras, shake hands, pretend the walls weren't closing in. Instead, I fled to a storage closet and sobbed into a stack of fabric swatches. The London Design Expo had been circled on my calendar for months. A booth with my name on it. An industry badge. 2 press interviews and a demo slot on the sustainability stage. But that was before the legal letter. Before the sleepless nights. Before the emails went unanswered and clients started asking if they should pause our orders. By the time I arrived at the expo center, everything felt wrong. My booth looked flawless, brushed brass, recycled oak, minimalist placards, but I could barely stand. I hadn't eaten more than a slice of toast in 2 days. The camera flashes were blinding. The compliments felt like static. "Stunning textures, Clara, you've got an eye. Are you expanding into interiors? What's next for Monroe Studios?" All I could think was lawsuit, frozen funds, vanishing credibility. I answered with autopilot smiles and generic quips. Just grateful to be here, taking it 1 grain at a time. But my chest was tight, my mouth dry. Every laugh felt like a lie. Jess, ever my shadow, hovered close. I saw her watching me, her brow furrowed, lips pressed thin. She knew I was on the edge. I made it 37 minutes. At minute 38, I slipped away past the back curtain behind the staging corridor into a dim storage closet lined with backup banners and canvas rolls. I sank to the floor and clutched a fabric swatch in both hands, holding it like a lifeline. My body curled in on itself. I wept, the kind of crying that doesn't make sound at first, just shudders, then gasps, Then grief you didn't know was still inside you. I wept for the brand I'd built, for the trust shattered, for the fear of watching it all collapse from one unsigned envelope. I didn't hear Jess come in. She knelt beside me, wrapped an arm around my shoulder, and whispered, "It's okay. Let it out." I clutched her sleeve like a child. "I can't fix this," I said into her shirt. "I don't know how." She pulled out her phone and stood. "I didn't want to do this without your permission," she said softly. "But you need help, legal help." I looked up. "Jess, I can't afford a solicitor. Not just any solicitor," she cut in. "Your solicitor." And then she dialed. "Henry, it's Jess Lee. Clara's in trouble." I froze. Henry, my brother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Not since the night he left for Sydney. Not since he stormed out of our parents' house after another blowout with our father about real jobs and disgracing the Monroe name. He'd studied law, built his life from scratch, cut contact with most of the family, including me. I never blamed him. I just figured I wasn't worth the return trip. Jess glanced at me and nodded into the phone. Yes, she's safe, but she's being sued and it's serious. She needs you." I was too stunned to stop her. 2 days later, I opened the studio door to find him standing there. Same angular jaw, same piercing stare. Only now his curls were tamed, his suit sharp, and his energy quieter, controlled. He crossed his arms. "So, you're being hunted." I swallowed hard. "That's one way to put it." He stepped in, closed the door behind him, looked around at the stacks of journals and sketches spread across the workbench like a war map. "You've built something real," he said, almost surprised. I nodded. "And now someone's trying to rip it away." His jaw tightened. He turned to me, voice steely. "Then let's win this damn thing." Henry turned my flat into a war room. Within hours, he had papers clipped, documents scanned, and a corkboard up against the kitchen wall with color-coded tabs. Jess and I stood by helplessly, mugs in hand, watching as my estranged brother turned chaos into strategy. "I need everything," he said. "Every sketch, every prototype photo, your website's code, timestamps, anything that proves authorship." I handed him my journals. "Start with these," I said. "I've documented every design since day one, even the flops." He flipped through the first one, nodding slowly. "Good, you've got a paper trail. That's half the war." Jess hovered near the window, arms crossed. "So who exactly are we at war with?" That was the question burning holes in my throat. I hadn't dared to voice it yet. Because a part of me already knew. 3 days into his digging, Henry found it. We were in the studio, surrounded by sawdust and tension, when he looked up from his laptop with a face like stone. "I need you to sit down," he said. I did. He turned the screen toward me. An email chain, 3 months old, between my former assistant, Maya Green, and a company called Artisan Luxe Interiors. The subject line was simple: "Monroe Mirror Line, pre-release mock-ups for offer." My mouth went dry. I clicked through the attachments. Every one of them was mine. My early drafts, my sketches, designs I hadn't even published yet. Sold, for next to nothing. She signed an NDA," I whispered. "I trusted her." Maya had interned with me during my first pop-up. I taught her how to sand properly, let her shadow my process, even gave her a holiday bonus when we landed our first boutique deal. She'd left 3 months ago, claiming she needed to focus on freelance design. I never imagined she'd walk out the door and sell my future behind it. I stared at the screen, stomach curdling. "How much?" I asked. Henry grimaced. "Low 4 figures, enough for rent and a weekend in Paris." Jess muttered a curse under her breath and kicked a stool across the floor. I didn't move. I felt hollow. It was one thing to be attacked by strangers, rivals, big brands who didn't know me and didn't care to. But this was intimate. This was betrayal with a familiar face. "She knew everything," I whispered. "My production gaps, which designs were in progress, which ones I hadn't launched yet. She even saw me cry the day we missed the Notting Hill shipment." "She used proximity," Henry said quietly. "That's how they get you." I nodded, slow and mechanical. Then I stood, walked into the studio corner, locked the door, and turned off the lights. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to rage. I just wanted to disappear. To crawl inside the walnut grain and sleep forever. Outside, I could hear Jess pacing, Henry making calls. The war room was still active, but inside that locked studio there was only silence. And the dull, unbearable ache of knowing that someone you lifted up used your hands as a ladder to steal what you hadn't even finished building. I don't know how long I stayed in there. Long enough for the sun to dip. Long enough for the dust to settle. When I finally emerged, I didn't say a word. But I didn't cry either. I picked up a journal, set it on the workbench, and started flipping, one page at a time. Because if someone wanted to claim my work, they'd have to erase every sketch, every note, every timestamp, and every inch of sawdust I'd bled for. And that, I promised myself, they wouldn't survive. It was dawn. London's light filtered in pale and hesitant, bouncing off dust-coated windows. Jess was asleep on the couch, arms folded beneath a blanket of invoices and packaging tape. Henry sat at the kitchen table, dead-eyed over his laptop, a cup of cold coffee beside him. And I walked in barefoot, holding the one thing they'd never be able to counterfeit, proof. I placed 3 design journals on the table with a solid thump. "These are dated," I said. "Initial sketches, development notes, even color samples. Every change, every notch, every imperfection, I logged it." Henry looked up. "Where did you even?" "I documented everything," I cut in. "From the day I carved my first prototype on that flat's kitchen floor to the moment Maya said she was just exploring freelance options. I kept it all, just in case." Jess stirred, blinking at the sound of my voice. "I've got raw photos, timestamped drafts, supplier receipts, Instagram upload metadata. Even my first mirror's design code is embedded into the wood finish under the lacquer. You'd need a microscope to catch it, but it's there." Henry closed the laptop slowly. He smiled, not the patronizing kind or the relieved kind, the proud kind. "Good girl," he murmured. For the next 4 hours, we turned the flat into a forensic lab. Henry poured through the journals while Jess cataloged digital files. I labeled every sketch and logged every sample. I even called up past clients who'd purchased early pieces and asked if they'd send photos of the stamps on the back. By noon, we had a wall covered in evidence. Jess called it the gallery of righteous rage. But we needed more than records, more than paper. We needed voices. So I picked up my phone and called every client, every influencer, every boutique owner who'd ever placed an order with Monroe Studios. Some ignored me, some apologized, and some were furious. "You mean someone else is claiming they designed the Celeste curve mirror?" barked Elaine from Waverly Home. "I bought that straight from you, Clara, and I've got the email thread to prove it." A week later, we had testimonials, 31 and counting. Boutique buyers, interior designers, repeat customers. Even a student who'd based her graduate project on my sustainability blueprint sent in a recorded video statement. "Monroe's work was never just about aesthetics," she said. "It was about originality. You could feel the human hand in every inch. Anyone copying that, they're insulting the craft." Henry compiled it all into a submission folder so thick it looked like a legal textbook. We renamed it the dossier. At some point that afternoon, Jess handed me a Sharpie and nodded to the cover. "Label it, this is your gospel." I paused, then wrote, CLARA Monroe, Provenance and Payback. I stared at it for a moment because here's the thing. They didn't just try to take my work. They tried to take my story. But what they didn't know was I wrote it down, all of it. Late nights in splintered wood, the burn of glue on open skin, the joy of sanding something until it shined, the heartbreak of realizing someone close had gutted you for a paycheck. All of it lived in those pages. And now, so would their consequences. By nightfall, our flat was a mess of coffee cups, charging cables, and sticky notes. Jess had taped an old Monroe Studios promo sign to the bathroom door and written War Room HQ in neon pen. Henry came in with his sleeves rolled, tie askew, and 2 USB drives in hand. "We're ready," he said. I looked around. We weren't a legal team. We weren't a corporation. We were just a pissed-off designer, a sarcastic flatmate, and a brother who came back just in time. But we were ready. I nodded. "Then let's carve them down to the grain." The tribunal chamber looked like something out of a BBC crime drama. Wood-paneled walls, polished brass nameplates, and the kind of sterile chill that turned ambition into ice. Jess sat behind me, arms folded, hair pulled back like she was daring someone to cross her. Henry stood to my right, buttoned into his sharpest navy suit. Calm, controlled, dangerous. And me? I sat straight-backed in a black blazer I'd bought on clearance 2 years ago, the first piece of real clothing I'd worn to an expo. It still smelled like cedar and sawdust. I liked it that way. Across the room, the opposing counsel shuffled notes. 3 lawyers, 1 marketing rep from Artisan Lux, a man in a sleek gray suit who wouldn't meet my eyes. And finally, Maya. She looked smaller than I remembered, still stylish, still poised, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. The chairwoman of the tribunal called the session to order. "Miss Monroe," she said, "your response." Henry stood, spine rigid, tone cold. "We reject the claims in their entirety. Not only does Miss Monroe hold original ownership of every disputed design, but we are prepared to demonstrate, through documentation, testimony, and forensic evidence, that the plaintiff's case is built on repurposed intellectual property obtained through a breach of contract by a former assistant." The opposing counsel smirked. "Convenient success, Miss Monroe," he said. "Perhaps too convenient." My jaw tensed. Henry didn't flinch. "Let's test that theory," he replied. "With 30 witness statements, 75 documents, and 3 independent design historians." I could hear Jess quietly whisper, "Let's go," under her breath. The next 2 hours blurred. Henry presented it all: sketches, emails, photographs, timestamps, signed receipts from boutiques, testimonials from customers, buyers, and clients. The grad student's video played on a small monitor, her voice echoing through the chamber like a closing argument from fate. Then the piece de resistance. Henry pulled out a mounted sample of one of my mirrors, the original Celeste curve, and a magnifier lens. "Please direct your attention here," he said. The tribunal members leaned in. Even the opposition stood. "There under the lacquer," Henry pointed. "Microscopically carved into the wood, CM 1124. That's Miss Monroe's design tag, cataloged in her 2023 journal, time-stamped, witnessed, and confirmed by our forensic analyst." Silence. No one moved. Then Henry turned, walked calmly back to the table, and sat. The other side tried. They stammered about misunderstandings and parallel inspiration. But it was too late. The room already knew. The tribunal chair finally looked at me. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were kind. "Miss Monroe, do you have anything you'd like to say before we close?" I stood, cleared my throat, then said simply, "I carved every piece by hand. Every design carries my scars, my mistakes. My story, that's not just branding. It's my fingerprint. And no one gets to steal that." Then I sat back down. And for the first time in months, I felt taller than the room. She looked directly at me as she spoke. "In accordance with the findings presented," the judge began, voice sharp and unwavering, "this tribunal rules in favor of the defendant, Miss Clara Monroe. Her intellectual property rights are hereby upheld. The plaintiff, Artisan Lux Interiors, is found liable for unlawful usage of proprietary designs, willful breach of contract via proxy, and damages to brand reputation and business continuity." I didn't breathe. "The defendant is awarded £5.2 million in restitution and punitive damages, in addition to an immediate injunction against the continued sale, display, or distribution of her protected works." And then slam. The gavel hit. I blinked. The air in the room changed. It was over. I felt Jess clutch my forearm from behind. Her fingers were shaking. "We won, Clara. Holy hell, you did it." Henry didn't move. He just exhaled slowly, eyes locked on the counsel opposite us, watching their faces melt under the verdict. Even Maya, my former assistant, sank in her seat like she'd been punctured from the inside. Her lips parted slightly. Not to apologize, just to register that she'd lost. I stood, not in triumph but in reclamation. I gathered my journals, the ones they'd tried to refute. I nodded at the tribunal members, and I walked out without looking back. Outside, press had already gathered, tipped off by someone inside the room. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Clara, what does this mean for Monroe Studios? Do you plan to sue Maya Green personally? Is it true you're considering a global retail line?" I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. I turned my face to the camera lights, square and unapologetic, and gave them one thing: a smile, not forced, not polite, not corporate. The kind of smile you carve out of pain and let sharpen on the edge of justice. Behind me, Henry leaned close and whispered, "Justice is a hell of a carving, isn't it?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the tribunal started. "You have no idea." Later that evening, I stood outside a blank warehouse unit near Shoreditch. It was all exposed beams and echo, cold floors and fluorescent lighting. But when I walked inside, it didn't feel like a gamble. It felt like foundation. The lease sat in a folder unsigned for weeks. I pulled out the pen. At the bottom of the page, just above the landlord's signature line, I wrote in ink that didn't shake, Clara Monroe. CEO, Monroe Studios. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A new alert from our site dashboard. MonroeStudios.com, 11,041 pending orders. New press coverage flagged. I chuckled. Let it sink in. The girl who was kicked out with 2 suitcases in the rain. She now had a £5 million court win, a full-scale studio, and an e-commerce empire that was too large for manual fulfillment. Inside the flat, Jess had started packing boxes. "We're gonna need actual shelving," she muttered, trying to pull a packing tape roll off the floor with her foot. "Also, I found a stack of sketch pads behind the toaster. You have a problem." Henry passed her a marker. "Label it evidence of brilliance." I leaned against the counter, watching them banter, feeling something I hadn't in months. Safe, seen, whole, until my eyes landed on the envelope on the edge of the table. Cream-colored, embossed. Monroe and Tate, LLP. Unopened. Next to it, an email marked confidential, reconnection request. Also from my father's firm. I didn't reach for it, not yet, because that wasn't the next thing on my to-do list. The next thing was expansion. And this time, no one would be carving me out of my own future. It was raining again. The kind of thin, needling drizzle that made London feel colder than it was. I was in the new studio, arranging glass drawer pulls into velvet-lined trays when Jess poked her head into the showroom. "There's, people at the front." I looked up. "Buyers," she hesitated. "Not exactly." I walked to the storefront window slowly, my boots silent on the polished oak floors. Outside, a black town car idled at the curb, steam curling from its tailpipe. And there, standing under a dripping umbrella, coat darkened at the shoulders, was my mother. And beside her, stiff and unsmiling, was my father, Charles Monroe, of Monroe and Tate, the man who'd once shouted ungrateful brat. As I walked out of his office with nothing but 2 suitcases and a promise to myself. Now he looked older, smaller somehow. The storm outside hadn't even touched him, yet he still looked soaked in failure. I didn't move to open the door, let them wait. Eventually, Jess gave me a look. "I'll let them in, but I'm charging emotional hazard pay." She unlocked the front entrance. My parents stepped inside slowly, blinking at the space like it was sacred ground. And maybe it was. High ceilings. Clean lines. White oak walls engraved with Monroe Studios in warm brass. Display mirrors gleaming under track lighting. The hum of legacy built without their help. My mother broke first. "This place, Clara, it's beautiful." I didn't respond. My father cleared his throat. "We saw the BBC feature," he said. Of course they had. My hands rested gently on the edge of the counter. "And," he looked momentarily off balance, like he hadn't prepared for that question. "And we realize now," he said, "that perhaps we were too harsh." "Harsh," I repeated. He nodded. "Too quick to judge, too dismissive of what you were building." I waited. My mother stepped forward. "Monroe and Tate is struggling," she said gently. "Clients are leaving. There's talk about merging with a rival firm. We thought maybe there's a way we could work together." The silence that followed was the deepest cut. They weren't here to say sorry. They were here because they needed me, not as a daughter, as a lifeline. I smiled, not unkindly, not cruelly, just clearly. "I'm not interested." They blinked in tandem. "I'm not angry," I continued. "I don't hate you, I just don't owe you anything." My father opened his mouth, closed it again, then quietly, "We're considering selling shares." And there it was, the offer behind the visit. Jess, standing just behind the workbench, let out a soft exhale of disbelief. My mother's eyes shimmered, not with tears, with calculations. I ran my thumb over the edge of the mirror beside me. One I'd carved 3 winters ago, during a week I couldn't afford heating. The grooves were still slightly uneven. I looked up. "Tell me something," I said. "When I left your house, soaked in rain and disappointment when you told me I was throwing away the family name, did you ever think I'd be sitting here one day with the option to buy it back?" Silence. "I don't need Monroe and Tate," I said. "But if I do get involved, it won't be as a partner." My father's brow furrowed. "Then what?" As majority shareholder, I said simply. With creative control, with voting rights, and with my name above yours on every letterhead. His face stunned, my mother's tight with forced grace. Are you serious? He asked. I leaned forward, voice calm. I don't bluff, I carve. They left soon after, coat collars turned up against the drizzle. I watched their car disappear into the fog, then I turned to Jess. You think I was too cold? She grinned. Nah. That was art. I returned to my tray of drawer pulls, arranging them by tone and luster. Because legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. 12 board members, 2 former partners, 1 stunned father. I wore navy silk, structured, not soft. My hair was pulled back tight. No jewelry, no dramatic makeup. Just a woman at the apex of her own climb, standing in the tower they once told her she'd never touch. Charles Monroe, founding partner, sat at the head of the table, except today that seat wasn't his anymore. I didn't ask for it. The vote was unanimous. I was now the majority shareholder of Monroe and Tate. After weeks of negotiations, stock buyouts, and one firm merger that imploded before the ink dried, they offered me control. I signed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was CEO. No applause, no champagne, just signatures and silence. Now, as I took my seat at the head of the table, every eye turned toward me. My father's jaw twitched slightly. He didn't speak. I did. Thank you for assembling so promptly, I said, flipping open my notes. There will be changes to structure, branding, and internal equity, effective immediately. One of the older board members, a man who'd once told me to stick to design school, cleared his throat. With respect, Miss Monroe, your experience has been unconventional. I smiled. Precisely why it works. Another hand rose. What's the goal? I looked around the room, let the silence stretch. Then I said it clearly. To make this firm known not for the name it inherited, but for the name it almost lost. I didn't look at my father when I said it, but I felt the shift, the slow, grudging nods, the realization that I wasn't here to make peace, I was here to lead. After the meeting, they filed out one by one, murmuring polite congratulations, trying to recalibrate themselves around my orbit. Eventually, only one person remained. Charles Monroe. He stood slowly, straightened his tie. You've made something powerful, he said. Something real. I nodded. Yes, he hesitated. I was wrong, he said. The words landed soft. No pomp, just fact. I considered him, this man who raised me, dismissed me, and now faced me like an equal. I extended my hand. He took it. The handshake was brief. This is what legacy looks like, I said quietly. Earned, not inherited. Outside the boardroom, Jess was waiting near the lifts, grinning like she'd won the lottery. How'd it go? They blinked, I said, and then they bowed. We walked to the car, shoulder to shoulder. The city stretched out before us, lights flickering across the skyline like stars pulled into gridlock. This time, I wasn't chasing visibility, I was visibility. Every showroom, every product tag, every press release now bore a name they once tried to erase. Weeks later, Monroe Studios' flagship store opened on Regent Street. Oak paneling, curved glass, and a signature scent of cedar and white pepper diffused through the air. Clients browsed. Influencers filmed. The BBC returned for a second feature. And on the back wall, above a display of the original Celeste curve mirror, a plaque read, "Built by hand, reclaimed by will." Clara Monroe. As I stood there, watching a young girl trace her fingers along one of the carved ridges, Jess leaned in and said, "Think your parents will come to the grand opening?" I shrugged. "Maybe. Will you let them in?" I smiled faintly. "That depends." "On what?" "If they knock."